everyone, and welcome to the LatinX Business Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Gomez, and if you're looking to demystify the world of business through the raw, authentic stories of Latinx entrepreneurs, you've come to the right place. As someone with an MBA and an IRS enrolled agent license, I spent years helping freelancers, partnerships, and S corporations navigate the often tricky waters of the US tax law. Now, I'm bringing that expertise and passion to this community right here. So thank you for tuning in, and you know what? It's time to talk business. Hey Lou, is that you?
Hey, it's me, Randy. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
When your team reached out to me, I was like, dude, Lou has so much experience in the business world. I need to have him on the show. So I'm actually excited that I got you on, and let's get right into it and start with some housekeeping items, which is I always ask everyone, what is your preferred pronoun?
He, him, él, I would say. If we're being culturally relevant, I am, I think it would be he, him, and él.
No, that's good. We'll go by those, of course. And then within the Latinx community, how do you identify yourself?
So I'm in the Latino community. I identify as Latino, and obviously my heritage is Mexican American because it's Mexican. My parents were, my mother was born in Mexico. My dad was born here in the States, but my grandparents were Mexican. They were part of the Bracero program, as you get the benefit of you're born here, so you're an American citizen. So he was born in Summit Lake, Minnesota. So that gave him that benefit of being an American citizen. But, they were from Michoacan.
Michoacan. Okay, yeah, because that was going to be my next question to you. So the origins of your family. You guys are from Michoacan. Yeah, they got here through the Bracero program. So growing up, did you hear a lot about that program, or was it just kind of ingrained in you guys?
I learned of it and studied it in school just because I wanted to understand it. I heard the stories from my aunts and my uncles. So on my mom's side of the family, they're from Mexico City, from like the Xochimilco area in Mexico City, and my dad's side, they were from a little town called Tanuato de Guanajuato, which is just outside of Morelia in Michoacan. So that's where my grandparents had a farm. They would come to the States and kind of work the fields. And so on my dad's side of the family, I think out of 7 siblings, 5 of them were born in, Omaha, Des Moines. He was born in Summit Lake, Minnesota. So, all over.
Wow. It amazes me how one program can affect so many different families because they could have ended up anywhere in the States. My grandfather, now that you mention it, was also part of the Bracero program, but he actually was in North Carolina, but he went back. His idea was never to stay here in the U.S., right? Whereas some people were able to get some type of retribution if they had the paperwork together recently. While my grandfather was alive, he was like, "Yeah, I have nothing." He was that was in and out. He just came in, worked, and then he went back home. But yeah, I think that's so much. It's part of our Latino fabric, especially in the U.S. To have these type of ties and connections. And I think that's what's so great that we're everywhere now, right? We're all over the U.S., but a lot of us have that shared. But yes, thank you for giving us a little bit of your background information. Let's move on to your business trajectory and the business world you move yourself in now. How did you get started in the business advisory industry?
So in the consult, and I think so. It's interesting, as I kind of done my career in thirds. First third in biotech and pharma, middle third owning my own, as we say in Spanish, empresa, my own business in the consumer goods area, and then the last third has been in technology. So throughout all these different routes that I've taken, I've kind of developed a level of expertise and understanding of all these different things. Between that and my formal business education and my schooling, you start to learn a fair amount about different verticals. For me, those strong verticals are financial services, from my time on the board at Wintrust, and obviously just being a business owner, pharma, biotech, and I did some consulting on that right after I left the industry. After a successful exit in 2005, I still continued to consult for about a decade on and off with different pharma and biotech companies. So that kind of gave me the nexus for what has become Halo Advisory. As that developed, I rolled that advisory firm into Halo, and Halo now has been in place for probably about 5 years. If you take the time that I had Hippocratic Health Solutions company, which is another one that I founded, that, that takes me back probably about 20 years now. So fundamentally, what I ended up doing is taking the skill sets that I have and understanding the different things that I've done, running my own business, working inside corporations as an entrepreneur. I've now got a skill set that I can take and help other business push forward. And most recently, that skill set was put to the test in helping a foundling B2B SaaS company, a technology company that was kind of having some problems. And my thing is, I've been there. I had to manage a business through the Great Recession, through the 9/11 tragedy, through the .com bust. So I know what happens, and you get to learn what levers you need to pull on a business to make it go. And when things get really bad, or you have a recession or something, exactly, through having done, exactly how to get it there. So I've developed sort of like a toolbox of different things that it's probably an opportunity to kind of create a textbook of some sort. But for me, it's in a couple different frameworks that I use when I look at and analyze a business, and I say, all right, well, how's it doing? I look at its health from a financial perspective, from a structural perspective. How well is it functioning? How are its processes? And then you look at, all right, so now where do you got to take it? What's missing? You create an action plan around that and really kind of drive those four factors. So for me, that's been it's been great. And I like to say it was really a consulting firm that was born out of a need to drive that improved business efficiency for a lot of businesses. I think, for many business owners, they start out in a business because it's either one, they were raised in it. Maybe their parents had a restaurant, or maybe they had a passion like I did of owning a marine dealership, so it might not be your first, your first skill set, but every business owner needs kind of like advisors and people that they can turn to, because running a company, being in leadership of anything is kind of lonely at times. And, so you need good advisors, you need a good lawyer, you need a good tax advisor, an accountant, somebody that can kind of guide you down those paths. And you need somebody that has kind of done and been there, that you can kind of go to and say, hey, so when you were dealing with this, how did you go about it? That's what I do. I really kind of function sort of as a fractional COO, or I can be a fractional CEO if they so choose, but really kind of function as a fractional COO that goes in and frees the founder of the company to kind of do what they do best. Be the visionary, be, the person that's the ambassador for the company, for the brand. And then meanwhile, I'm able to kind of drop back and say, all right, so let's get these 5 things in order. All right. And make that happen. So really that has been the genesis for how Halo has really evolved. Really allows me to improve business efficiency and help scale the business. And because really what's happening with businesses right now is there's a lot of disruption. The pandemic was a disruptor. The move to go digital has been a disruption for businesses that haven't moved that quickly. So it's taking ideas, innovative thought processes, and saying, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought a contactless ordering system for your business? Here's a one that you can go to out of the box and just basically put your logos on. And now you've got an app that you can use to have your customers order stuff. And those types of ideas that help them, they're like, wow, I didn't know about that. Or so now I basically try to use those insights to help them drive progress in their business, and then basically improve the customer experience, which when they improve that customer experience for regardless of whether customers B2B or B2C, and when they improve that experience, they drive results and they see the impact.
And you know what? I think that hits also the point too of not only my podcast, right? I feel like myself going to business school and growing up in Los Angeles and not really seeing too many other people that look like me that were in business positions or that were in executive positions or were running businesses. And so it's so important for you to be here with us today, of course, but also to be talking about how you help these companies, because I work with a lot of startups as well. The startups that I work with, it runs the gamut. Sometimes someone has an intense passion for an item, and other times someone falls into, a really good position. Count your blessings, right? But now you're running a business at that point. So you never thought you were going to be running a business, but definitely I do think there is a lot of entrepreneurial spirit within the Latino community. And so, why don't we talk about maybe a case study of yours, without revealing too much information. How does one take a company that's close to bankruptcy to a thriving one? And even at that, during the pandemic, because that I think is something everyone needs to hear right now, because once the pandemic hit, it, I felt like a lot of my business clients were reaching out to me in the lowest spirits of spirits possible. And to me, I come from a business school background, so I'm like, all right, you gotta write this out, right? But like they're running a business, they have to run payroll, they have to meet that specific deadlines, and it can be very, very challenging at that point, right? So maybe you could take us through a small case study and let us know how you are able to turn a company around.
So let's kind of look. So I'll take an anonymous recent one that I worked on, and this company had a really good. They had a good product. They had gotten a good MVP and a good version 1.0, a tech company, So they got market product fit through the validation that in the middle of the pandemic they were able to get some really good companies to sign on for their product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they had that base of revenue that's going to allow them to be able to kind of take that first step towards scaling, potentially do a raise, et cetera. But their burn rate was really high. So going in, I looked and evaluated them based on their burn rate. I evaluated where they were at on personnel, what were their strengths, what were the weaknesses, their sales process, their ability to how are they dealing with the disruptions that were impacting business.
Yeah.
On March 13th, 2020, we all kind of went everywhere and home mostly. But, we
Right.
stopped kind of, going into work. And you still, for the revenue side of a business, you still had to, if you're a B2B type of business selling software, you still had to kind of make sales calls if you're trying to kind of apply your trade. So
Right.
this group sales department was really good at kind of creating awareness. Now they struggled a little bit with the pivot from in-person sales calls and the rapport building that happens in that in-person sales call to now having to be able to tell a better story and project on a screen, because that's kind of what it became during the midst of the pandemic. So it was really kind of taking that, looking at the revenue, looking at where they were at, looking at what their financial platform looked like, what were their cash to payment processes, what was their ability to basically take their accounts receivable and turn it around in a timely fashion. What were their contracts like? So really kind of dug deep into all of that. And typically you don't find a company that's on the brink of insolvency and you looked at the burn rate, it's like, all right, so you try to understand what happened before you got there.
Yeah.
But there's not a whole lot that you can change there and what happened. All you can do is the part moving forward. To be able to move forward, you kind of have to understand the past. So there was a little bit of digging that I had to do there to kind of understand some of the decisions that were made, why they were made, and then kind of plot a path forward. And really, and for that, it became, all about, all right, so how do we preserve cash? How do we preserve the cash we have so that you don't have to lay anybody off in the middle of a pandemic?
Right.
Because that's horrible for a business, and many businesses had to do that. So really, it's kind of how do you keep that the cash preservation very efficiently, move some things around in terms of the payment system and the like, and push some things into the future, and effectively do it in a headcount neutral way where you don't have to let anybody go. Because the easy thing is always, you could cut your way into solvency, but that's very short lived, because it impacts morale, it impacts a lot of different things. So it's really going in and try to do that in a headcount neutral way, in a way that preserves the integrity of the morale, and really went in and made sure that we turned that 60 days of capital into 90 and 120 days. And then, in the midst of all of that, pulled off a $2 million priced round, a financial raise, which improved the valuation of the business by 71%, brought new investors in that effectively helped. They bought into the mission of the company and the product, the stickiness of the product. And, those investors are still involved in the business today. They reformulated their board of directors, and that company has a shot, at least at this point, to move ahead, because so many companies, basically a third of the companies ever make it out of that seed round and go into a later series round. And the reasons they often don't go there is because they end up running into problems. A lot of them are financial. You could see the reasons why that might happen. In the case of this particular case study, the top 5 reasons are they run out of money, they lose investor interest, or they have no financing, no ability to pull off a round. Most cases, their business model needs tweaking, or they need to pivot it, And then the last one is,
Right.
they might lose focus. They just may lose focus, and the market changes around them. And so all of these factors kind of, you have to weigh them out and see, all right, so how do you address them? They
That's
say
what
on a
I was gonna ask you that. How do you go in as someone that's not part of the company that's gonna go in there and make changes and disrupt the natural ebbs and flows of what the company has so far? Because so many people are resistant to change, and I can only imagine you walking into a company, no one's ever seen you, but yet here you are, you're gonna be offering all these new solutions. How do you
Yeah,
manage
well,
that?
yeah, very, very delicately. And even when you do it very delicately, there's always the human side of things. There's the emotional part of it. As human beings,
Mm,
we're sometimes driven by our emotions. So there's a lot of resistance to change in that emotional part of it. In this particular case study, I mean, there was being brought in, and having the founder step aside in that role was probably not what the founder envisioned or wanted. But, it's very specific, special person in his own way. He has his strengths. It's just a lot of it is his inability to kind of grasp the change that was going on. I mean, I knew what I had to do at the end of the
yeah.
day is try to get the company to move forward, because my book, failure is not an option. I mean, it's easy to kind of go in and cut people and say, all right, well, we're now down to one salesperson, we're now down to two developers, and
Yeah.
hey, by the way, we just improved our lifespan by 4 months. But that's going to create panic in the company. So it's really saying, all right, well, what where's our money going? Where's the money
Yeah.
going? How much is in? Where's it going? And then how do we get more of it? And what do we have coming in receivables? So it was really a lot of those factors to kind of bring everything together and help the business go forward. The enviable position of being able to kind of come in and say, hey, I've got a little bit of an insider's perspective, because you've been in that you've been in that role, but yet you've got that external vantage point. The nice thing, it's kind of like being a Theo versus a parent. As a parent, you're vested into kids. It's like you're all day long in the kids. But as an uncle or as a grandparent, as a person kind of looking at it from the outside in, you're like, all right, it's great, but did you think about this? Or how about this with the child? So coming in a fractional capacity gives you the best of both worlds. It's like, what it's like to be that parent. You kind of understand some of the pain they may be going through, but yet you have that vantage point of being like that uncle. All right, I'm coming in. It's going to be for a period of time. At the end of the day, they can listen to me, or they can just tell me not to tell me to go away, and that's fine too. Because in the end, your fees are your fees, and you're an advisor. They could choose to take the advice or not.
I like the idea of how you frame that, because really those skills that are being transferred over from acting like a Dia or Dia are definitely, you're like a sounding board, right? People can
Mm-hmm.
confidently and privately send ideas your way, and then you can say yes, no, or maybe based on my experience. But and I think you're right. So many people, because we are human beings, as much as we try to separate business and personal emotions don't exist in the business world, it's
Mm-hmm.
really tough to separate those for a lot of people. And it's not something that comes so naturally to some people than others. But I love that analogy you made, because here we are thinking that you have to have, like, obviously experience, a little bit of ingenuity and creativity. It means that you've probably had these skills since you were growing up. You're just like refining them and perfecting them now, which I love. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
No, and there's a lot of other business case studies on that. I mean, I've worked with organizations as well, where the executive director was challenged by either the board of directors, and they were having a tough time kind of getting we'll call it their KSIs, their key strategic initiatives in place, and
Hmm.
getting the support of their board to kind of do that. So a lot of it is serving as that coach, that advisor, that person, that confidant that kind of gives them the skill set of, all right, well, you might want to position them this way, or ask them
Yeah.
these questions, or also just saying, hey, do you mind if I attend the meeting and at one of your meetings to just kind of see what the interaction and the dynamics like, and then stepping back and sort of being that advisor, that consigliere to him, and saying, hey, you know what? With this person, you might want to consider this. With this person, you might want to consider the following. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and kind of give them some sort of like a dashboard that they can go at it with.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep the interview moving along. Let's talk about supplier diversity, because you have a lot of experience with that. What is happening right now at the moment with supplier diversity within the Latinx community? How are you seeing it? And maybe, yeah. Let's start with that.
I think we're finally realizing that I think the pandemic did a lot of waking up for our community. I mean, it's for every community, but I think it did a lot of reprioritization for the Latino community. Because think of where most of our businesses were. They were in a lot of service oriented markets where we've created services. Perhaps we had an F&B restaurant. We were in the restaurant business, and so when that gets decimated or that gets leveled, you kind of have to look at, all right, where can you create the next level of revenue? And if you're just busy going business to consumer or customer, how can you go business to business? How can you create another channel for revenue for your business that might not exist? And I'll give you an example. There's a customer that I'm working with right now. During the pandemic, they had a restaurant, and they decided that they did not want to, they didn't want to reopen to the level that they had in the past. They wanted to shrink their sit down area. They wanted to do mostly ghost kitchen and carry out, because that's kind of how everybody's doing this. They also, by doing that, they're able to shrink their overhead down dramatically. But then they decided that they were going to pursue direct catering revenue to large corporations. So now they're looking to see if they can qualify as a diverse supplier, a female-owned business, to be able to run the corporate, we'll call it the corporate outing in corporate, delivery service for the different specialty meetings that they have at a couple companies that they're affiliated with in their area. So they go through the procurement department. They gotta look at their business. They gotta qualify as either an MWE or as an MBE. Then they might go to something like the NMSDC, the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council, and get certified that route as well to get additional certification. But what they find is that, really, the Latino community has not historically done a really good job of going down that route. There's been a majority of that has gone to the African American community. So in that procurement area, I think that there's an opportunity for Latino businesses to get more of a stakeholder in that area and help grow their, we'll call it, generational wealth. Because a big contract with Fortune 50 company doing executive outings, let's just say, for how many a year, is a nice side revenue stream to have, in addition to running your business. You do that times X number of the companies that are in your local area. You now have an outplacement source of revenue that you can pretty much drop into any company. And that's nice. That's nice side revenue for when your business might have a slow period during the middle of the day, because people only come to eat in the evenings. So now you've created a use for your kitchen. You continue to employ people, and it just adds additional revenue to the bottom line of a business. So, there's a whole process there. And the challenge that I think exists for Latino owned businesses is we haven't gone to that area, that we've not asked for a seat at that table. I think fundamentally a lot of businesses are waking up and seeing that needs to change. Right now, corporations have said, oh yeah, they want to help bring in more diverse suppliers. I don't know that there's some companies that are doing that very well, but I don't know that every company knows where to start. That is an area where they don't know how to identify the businesses that are diverse. They don't know where to go, and more importantly, they don't know how they are as a business partner to some of those diverse businesses as well, because that's one of the biggest challenges. Do they have a one size fits all payment model that is net 90 or net 120 days? Are they different in how they deal with diverse businesses? Do they have flexibility, or do they have programs that can help a diverse business? Because obviously, the cost of capital is a lot different, for a small business than it would be for, a large vendor.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think. There's so many people that have their negocio startups, right? But they might be running cash basis, right? So how do you work with the business that's running cash basis, and maybe they will be able to supply food for that corporate company at that corporate outing, but it just takes a little bit more planning. But also, you're right, asking for that seat at that table. I think historically, because we haven't been the ones that are in the position of entrepreneurs and owning these businesses, that's where maybe we're lacking. But I'm starting to see a lot of people nowadays, just not a necessity. It's not even part of our creativity as Latinos. We're super creative, and we'll find a way to make money and make ends meet. But we're also trying to survive, right? Live day by day without having to worry about being able to put food on the table. So
Yeah, I think it's working smarter, not harder. I think I tell my daughters this a lot. Sometimes it's not
yeah.
always about working hard. We know we're going to work hard, but let's work
Hmm.
smarter. And that's where the strategy comes into play. That's where stepping back a little bit and saying, all right, well, what are the better avenues that we can go at to bring additional revenue streams to the business? That's what large companies do. Corporations do that with their board of directors. The board looks at the strategy of how they're going to market. They give them advice. And I think as in our communities, I think Latinos should be parts of chambers of commerce. They should be parts of advisory groups where they got other business owners that they can bounce problems off of. Their sort of kitchen cabinet, if you want to call it, their
Right.
kitchen board to really take some of those problems to them, because it is lonely running a business. I've been there and I am there, so it's you do need somebody that you can bounce these ideas off.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even now, like becoming a supplier for a large Fortune company, I think a lot of it's missing the education. Like if we have the knowledge, then you can move forward with the proper decision or make the right decision at the right time if the opportunity shows up, right? Because I think
Yeah.
so a lot of times people, even in our community, who are maybe just lack the knowledge, right? And so because they lack the knowledge, then they won't move on an opportunity. Or if they don't
Mm-hmm.
understand like precisely how processes work and who you go to, where you get certified by. And that's really the toughest part, right? Because who guides these people, especially if no one in your family before has owned their own business, right? And then hiring can get pretty expensive, like you said, right? How you gain capital, but also having the money to be able to pay for advisors if you don't have somebody that you can go to. So yeah, no, thank
Right.
you for addressing that issue. And I guess going along with that, like how can Latino companies then get one step ahead of the game? How do we get more Latino companies to be part of these groups and to become suppliers for these large companies?
I think they have to get involved. I think like here in Chicago, I think the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has got some great initiatives they have working that they're working on. I think there's the United States Chamber of Commerce, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce also has some great initiatives that they're working on as well. So those are some great resources to start with. But then there's other think tanks, and there's actually some great scaling programs for businesses that can really kind of give you that intensive knowledge in a very short amount of time. The Stanford Latino Education Institute, SLEI, is a program that you can apply to join. They have cohorts that start twice a year, and they kind of take you through sort of a coaching process of getting your business scaled. So they really kind of, you share you share what is going on with your business, what are the challenges, and you've got now some of the country's best professors who are at Stanford, one of the top business schools. You've got them now serving as a resource to you. So they help you get to that next level. So they're also kind of doing some things on supplier diversity as well that I think they're going to be unveiling in the very near future. But there's a lot of opportunity, and I think that's an area that when you look at the pillars of DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, there's usually 4 pillars that kind of come to play for every major company. There's 2 internal ones. There's workforce development, and then the policies, practices, and procedures that help you be a more inclusive business internally as a company, right? Then there's 2 external ones. There's community involvement, and then the last one is procurement, which is one where you can actually, by supporting businesses in the communities in which your employees work and live, you actually create generational wealth for those businesses. Because that, I think, from a DEI strategy is huge. And right now we've heard the topic of ESG, a lot in corporate America, in investment tables. The environmental, social, and the governance impacts, the S and the G, are the parts that fall under diversity, equity, and inclusion. Or I should say the other way around, diversity, equity, inclusion fall under S and the G. So that's really where, from a sustainability standpoint, a company's footprint in the community in which they get customers from that buy their products, they need to make sure that it's complete wraparound, that community thrives, so they can support the business, the corporation. Everybody wins. It's not a zero-sum game where, hey, listen, we go to you and we need you to buy our product, and then that's it. Now investors are demanding a completely different change in that, and that's where the ESG drivers that are coming into play. Every major corporation is putting together an ESG strategy that is going to be that's starting at the board level and going all the way down to the grassroots level. So I think that's a very important aspect to take into mind. So I think the Latinos community is poised to take advantage of that and to make sure that they get their seat at the table.
Yeah, no, I keep hearing from you the overlying theme that preparation is key, right? You need to be prepared to be able to scale, and so you need to scale before you start scaling, right? Which is kind of
Right.
a conundrum in itself. But I'm glad you're sharing these resources with the listeners, and there are many groups even in the Los Angeles area. You're in Chicago. Every city has, a Latino Chamber of Commerce, or a Latino business group that you can join. And it's true, you do meet a lot of Latino industry based folk that can help you out. But no, thank you for sharing that. But let's talk about a little bit about the your book. I know, and let's switch topics, right? You have a book that's going to come out soon, right?
I do, and it's been a lifelong dream of me. So I love to say that when I was really young, a really young Lou Sandoval, I created a bucket list. So on this bucket list, there were things that I wanted to do before I left this gracious planet. And one of those things that was on that list was writing a book. I've done a lot of the other ones, but one of the things that I wanted to do on that list was writing a book. And I'm
Okay.
happy to say that in a little less than a month, we'll be launching my first book, which is called Tenacity for Life: Lessons from Life, Business, and the World Around Us. And it's basically, so for me, I've taken on journaling as sort of a way to kind of clear my mind. It's somewhat therapeutic. Some people do yoga, some
Yeah,
people go for runs. I
of
write, I
course.
journal. So I've
Hmm.
been journaling for a long time. And so this is basically an ability to take a lot of my journaling and my thoughts around things that I've experienced in life. And maybe it's the advantage point of being able to look at 3 decades of a business and a life and a career,
Yeah.
and say, all right, I didn't know why that was happening at the time that it happened, but now that I'm able to look backwards on it, I see that I needed to go through that to get to where I'm at today. Just saying, Soren Kierkegaard, who's a theologian from the 17th century, he has a saying that says that life is best lived forward with an understanding of the past. And obviously, I think when things happen to you, you always sit back and you go, all right, well, why did that happen to me? Or you try to, you delve in trying to deconstruct it. Well, the difference in that is that you sometimes you just got to press down and live through it. It'll be clear enough for you in the future why it
Yeah.
happened, and
No,
so
definitely.
for me, it's just my vantage of being able to look back at my life and say, all right, so this happened, and more so, the book serves as a little bit of an inspiration for people. So regardless of whether it was challenges in your business, challenges in your personal life, challenges in your family life, loss of loved ones, you can press through that. There's an opportunity for you to come out better on the other side. And in some cases, as my grandmother would say, cuando se cierra una puerta, se abre otra, which is basically when
Yeah.
one door closes, another one opens. Kind of works out that way. So this book is sort of an expression of that. It's my first, I hope, of many, but
Yeah.
it's something that I really get a chance to kind of relish in here in the next year to come.
No, that's great. I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm looking forward to being able to share some of your stories with some of my employees and some of the people that I am very close with, because there's always a need to look at other people's perspectives. I feel like every day to day that you're hustling and grinding, you can get so stuck in what's happening at the moment, right? That sometimes it's hard to even think like, oh, wait, I should reflect, or maybe I should think about what the future needs to look like, right?
Right.
So I'm actually excited that, yeah, your book is coming out April 13th, Tenacity for Life. So definitely I'm going to be getting a copy of it. So thanks for sharing that. And then I'll look forward to any other books that you have out, because at the end of the day, I think what you're doing now with the book is actually sharing your experience and being able to hopefully pass some knowledge on, right, to those who are reading
Yes.
it, and they can learn from your stories, from your life. And I yeah, that's great. Let me see, I have another question for you. If you were to be like a young Latino right now and you were gonna start your own business, or you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, what is some advice you would provide them?
It would real the real I think the thing is to create some big goals for yourself, and to those goals really attach a timeline that is going to really set you up to be able to accomplish those goals. That's number one. Number two, get really comfortable with failure. I think so often
Yeah.
failure is a word that everybody kind of shuns because it doesn't make you feel great. But honestly, when I look back, I talk about my rear looking vantage point. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of failures, but I think that's why I've also grown so much and I've been able to persevere. and the tenaciousness that I've had in my life and how I go at life is
Yeah.
primarily predicated by the fact that I'm just comfortable with failure. I think early on, my dad was big at letting us kind of scrape our knees if we wanted to or needed to, and then he'd pick us up and tell us, all right, so now what did you learn from that?
Yeah.
You're not gonna do that again, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's sort of an extension of my dad's lessons, and you got to be comfortable being able to fail, because things aren't always going to work out the way you want them. Things aren't always going to end up the way you want them, but you got to be able to sit back and say, all right, it happened to be the way it did. What did I learn, and what will I do differently next time? So, and that
Yeah.
applies to business. Businesses, you look at the failure and success rate of small businesses, it's there. So you have to be comfortable with it, stepping out on the edge of the diving board and knowing that when you jump off that diving board into business ownership, chances are you may sink or you may swim. In most cases you want to swim, but you got to be
Right.
okay. You got to be okay. You got to know when to go. And then the last one is, no matter what you do, I think passion sells, and dale con ganas, which is basically give it your all. I think it's important that our Latino community is very driven by entrepreneurship. There's so many areas where we're excelling. We're the backbone of this country. If you look at the history of the indigenous people in the Americas, we are the backbone of the Americas. This is our time. I think this is our time.
Yes, I love that. I definitely agree with you. I think that a lot of the barriers to entry in any industry at the moment have been drastically reduced for many reasons, technology and knowledge that you can find right online, but also we're living in different times. Obviously, there's always opportunities and things that need to be improved. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot of opportunity at the moment. I also believe, and maybe it's just my business school training, but I believe that if that person next to me started the business, then I can also start that business and thrive in it as well. And we can both have thriving businesses in the same field. If someone wants to get a hold of you and they're looking for someone to help and come in and work with their company, how can someone get a hold of you?
The easy part is I've got a personal website. It's www.lousandoval.com. That's
Okay.
one. Or I can be found on Twitter, social media, LinkedIn. Again, Lou Sandoval. On any of those. And then my book website is a way to get a hold of me too. It's tenacityforlife.com. So
okay, I will definitely have that information in the podcast notes. So if someone's listening, they don't have to write that down right away. They could always go back and look at the notes, and that information will be there so they can get a hold of you. But Lou, I think we reached the last of our questions. So I'm very thankful for your time, and thank you for coming on and agreeing to be on the show. At this point, I would say hasta la próxima. If you have maybe the next time you're on the show would be the next time you have your next book launch coming on.
That sounds good, Randy. I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. All right.
Igualmente. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your network. Your support helps our LatinX business community grow stronger with every listen, and I truly invite you to connect with us. Send us your questions, your comments, or even your own business stories to randy@rgtaxes.com. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, keep learning, keep building your business, and keep growing your business mindset.